They say every workshop keeps two kinds of time: the clock on the wall and the calendar in your fingertips. I've lived by both. My name is Samuel. I speak fluent thousandths, and I spent 40 years chasing straight lines through crooked metal. I thought I knew the rules of making things: measure twice, cut once, deburr, test, repeat. Then the war took my son's legs, and I learned a new rule. Sometimes the thing you have to build is a life. He was Michael to everyone else. Mikey to me, 26, loud with plans. The kind of kid who could turn a dead truck over with a joke and a borrowed wrench. A pressure plate doesn't ask for a resume. He came home with bandaged stumps where his legs had been, and a look in his eyes I recognized from late nights at the lathe. Concentration that had outlived comfort. The hospital fitted him with standard prosthetic legs. They were good, built by decent people with real knowledge. But good doesn't mean right. The sockets pinched where tissue swelled. Liners turned sweat into sandpaper. Knees stumbled on slopes a child could handle barefoot. Mikey named them the loners, as if walking had been rented to him, due back by Thursday at noon. "You'll adapt," the therapist said, kind and correct. "I will," he said, "but I'd rather evolve." He had a girlfriend then, Elena. She'd loved him before the blast and tried to keep loving him after, the way a person tries to carry a piano down the stairs without waking the neighbors. Her parents invited us to dinner and served their worry with the roast. Her father cleared his throat like it owed him interest. "You're brave," he told my boy, which is what men say when kindness has run out of vocabulary. But a son-in-law should be able to provide. "So should a son," Mikey said, smiling in a way that made the truth sting less. Her mother set her napkin down like a verdict. "We only mean it will be hard. Work, children, stairs, stairs. You learn how much a word weighs when someone drops it on your chest." Mikey proposed anyway. Elena said yes in the voice of a girl who remembered sunshine. 2 weeks later, after a very long car ride with her parents, she stood on my porch and said no in the voice of a woman who'd been asked to choose between hope and peace. "They say it won't work," she whispered. "They say you can't live the life I want." "What life is that?" he asked softly. "The easy kind," she said, hating herself for the accuracy. He nodded. I watched him do something only soldiers and machinists seem to know how to do well: salute the truth, then walk into the problem. When the door closed and the quiet got too loud, he let his shoulders fall for 1 minute. Then he looked at me and said, "Dad, I'm done apologizing for legs I don't have. Let's build the ones I do." I wanted to say, "We're machinists, not magicians." I wanted to say, "There are whole companies with budgets bigger than our town." Instead, I looked at the titanium bar leaning against the bench, felt the old itch in my hands, and said, "Okay, let's evolve." We started the way all unreasonable projects start, on a garage floor stained with older ideas. I took measurements. He learned the new topography of the body he'd always lived in. We read papers at night: socket interfaces, shear forces, gate symmetry, and called smarter people in the morning. A prosthetist in Denver described a vacuum system that hugged without bruising. A gate lab director in Boston talked about stance phase control. A robotics engineer who'd quit a flashier job to build a leg for his kid taught us to think in millinewtons instead of miracles. Prototype 1 fit like an argument. 2 bruised him. 3 pinched. 4 blew a fastener in our test rig after 50 hours and taught us humility in a spray of aluminum. We named the rig Stubborn because it didn't care about feelings, and because hope is pretty in a story and useless under load. By prototype 10, the socket slid on like a handshake from someone you trusted before you knew why. Money bled through every crack. Grants were helpful until they weren't. An investor slid a term sheet across a shiny table that traded our future for a nicer coffee machine. I folded it into a paper airplane and sent it back. "We'll bootstrap," Mikey said. "We'll bootleg," I answered. And we both laughed because if you stop laughing, the math starts yelling. We posted a plain video, a veteran in our legs walking up a grassy hill, pausing at the top, then jogging down. No music. The rhythm of his feet wrote its own. The inbox filled overnight. Soldiers, nurses, a teacher who wanted to stand at the board without scheduling her pain. A logger who'd made peace with crutches but not surrender. People know truth when it moves. That's how Maya found us. She emailed from a university lab 3 hours away. "Your gait symmetry's solid," she wrote, "but your energy return is leaving points on the table. If you can stand a person who argues about spring constants, I can help." She arrived with equations, a ponytail that didn't care about meetings, and the kind of curiosity that makes rooms brighter even under fluorescent lights. She argued with Mikey about torque maps until both were smiling. She argued with me about tolerances until I admitted she was right. Together we tuned a carbon fiber keel that returned energy instead of hoarding it, and a microprocessor knee that forgave a stumble but rewarded a stride. When the numbers finally settled, she wiped a streak of grease across her cheek, laughed at herself, and got back to work. That's the day I started rooting for a different kind of love story. We named the company Vital Dynamics because my son likes big letters, and I like words that earn them. The city inspected, the fire marshal inspected, and the FDA inspected in a tone that suggested they'd met men like me before. We passed because we treated documentation like another machine that needed to be trammed. A stubborn prosthetist ran our first pilot. 10 patients who had been told good enough too many times. 10 became 30. 2 VA hospitals called to ask how soon we could deliver. We told them the truth. Not soon, not yet. But we are building the capacity to become the people who say yes. We hired quietly. Veterans, young techs with good hands, parents who could solve logistics in their sleep. We wrote our socket fit promise in English a grandmother could read. If your limb changes, your socket does too. No lectures about weight or willpower. We set up a foundation arm that helped when insurance decided a life was too expensive this quarter. A reporter found the Hill video. Then a bigger reporter found the first reporter. Money changed the velocity, but not the mission. A competitor threatened a patent suit. We sent them a box of donuts and a copy of our claims. When we finally took outside capital, the terms didn't make me itch. That's when Elena's parents wrote. The letter was polite and covered in the kind of apologies that sound like a second language. "We misjudged," they said. "You have accomplished so much." A week later, Elena asked to meet Mikey for coffee. He went because closure is a favor you do for the person you used to be. She apologized for the way fear had dressed itself as wisdom. She asked, halting, whether time kept receipts for bad decisions. "I hope you're happy," he said, and meant it. Then he drove to the lab, where Maya was elbow-deep in a calibration that refused to behave. He stood beside her until she noticed. "Hold this," she said, handing him a sensor cable like you hand something valuable to someone you don't need to explain yourself to. He held it. The numbers settled. "Coffee?" he asked. "Always," she said. There was no fireworks montage. There were just days that looked like work and felt like home, and somewhere between one inspection and the next, a life socketed itself to a future that fit. We grew. We learned to say no to bad money and yes to good people. We licensed a knee design to a European partner and still flew economy because gratitude looks better with legroom you had to earn. We built a clinician training program that felt like a reunion. We moved into a building that didn't leak when it rained and hung the first good socket on the wall. Ugly. Perfect. A reminder. Sometimes people ask if I'm still angry at the family who said no. I was, for a season. Then the work got loud. Bitterness is heavy even when you set it down. It leaves prints. We built things that don't. On a Thursday that believed it was ordinary, Mikey set a ring in the foam cutout of a tool case because romance in his hands is competent. "I don't have a speech," he told Maya. "I have a plan." She laughed, cried a little, and said yes while holding a torque wrench. I built the wedding arch from carbon fiber and aluminum because wood would have been too easy. Alma from my shop draped it in flowers and told me my fasteners were showing. Veterans in dress blues stood next to kids who'd learned to run on our legs and didn't want to stop. A reporter shoved a mic at me. I wanted to say something grand. I said something true. "They told my boy stairs would be a problem," I said. "He built a staircase." When I say built a staircase, I don't mean just wood and nails. I mean he built a life, step by step, out of the rubble they left him in. You see, after the wedding, after the tears and smiles, we thought the storm had passed. But life doesn't work like that. It's like the tide. One wave leaves, another crashes in. The orders for our prosthetics poured in faster than we could build them. On one hand, it was good. Proof that what we were making mattered. On the other hand, it was a test. Supply shortages, back orders, impatient clients. Every night the phone rang like an alarm bell. Sometimes it was a veteran in another state who'd heard about us. Sometimes it was a mother who just wanted her kid to run again. And sometimes it was a corporate shark offering to buy us out. I still remember one meeting. Big conference table, suits with gold watches. They slid a check across the table, enough money to never work again. My boy, calm as stone, pushed it back. "You didn't build this," he said. "You didn't bleed for this. We did." That was the moment I knew. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was a man who'd found his purpose. We worked 16-hour days. Sometimes he'd fall asleep right on the workbench, tools still in his hands. I'd drape a blanket over him, only for him to wake an hour later, coffee in hand, ready to keep going. And when we delivered a pair of legs, it wasn't just business. It was personal. I watched him kneel down in front of a little boy once, adjusting the straps, whispering, "All right, buddy. Now show me what you've got." And that first shaky step would turn into a run, and the whole room would erupt. One winter night, the cold seeping through the shop walls, he looked at me and said, "Dad, what if we can't keep up? What if we fail?" I put my hand on his shoulder. "Son, success isn't measured in how many we make. It's in the lives we change. You built a staircase when they said you couldn't. You'll build 1,000 more." Months passed. We reached our 1,000th patient. The town threw us a celebration. The mayor gave us a plaque, called us local heroes. But my eyes weren't on the stage. They were on the crowd. Her parents were there, the ones who once told her to leave him because he'd never be enough. They didn't come to speak, but the way they looked at him, it was all the apology we'd ever need. The company grew beyond our imagination. We partnered with hospitals, developed new materials that felt almost like real skin. We even launched a program to give free prosthetics to children in need. My boy traveled, giving talks at schools and veteran centers. He'd tell them, "They told me stairs would be a problem, so I built my own." And every time he said it, I saw the spark in people's eyes. Then came the day I'll never forget. We were closing up shop when a man in a wheelchair rolled in, cradling a worn army cap. He'd lost both legs in service, just like my son. He said he'd been saving for years, but still couldn't afford the kind of prosthetics we made. My son knelt down, looked him straight in the eye and said, "You don't need to save another dime. We've got you." That night, he worked until sunrise to make them himself. One evening, as we sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the hills, my boy turned to me. "Dad," he said, "I used to think losing my legs was the worst thing that ever happened to me. Now I know. It was the beginning of everything." I couldn't say anything. I just put my arm around him. Because he wasn't wrong. If you take one thing from this, let it be this. Life will hand you walls. Sometimes they're made of brick, sometimes of doubt, sometimes of pain. But if you're willing to fight, if you're willing to work, those walls can become steps. And if you keep climbing, one day you'll look back and realize the view from the top was worth every single one.